Finishing well has been a common theme that we've noticed over the last few months from the summer into the fall with a lot of creatives. It takes a lot of guts to be able to figure out how to do that and do that well and with some courage as well as respect for yourself. In this episode, I sit down with Helen from Older and Wiser. We discuss her artist pillars that make her unique, some of the ways that help guide her decisions on the productions that she's doing, and also some of the processes that it takes to actually make those productions happen. It's not that easy. It's so cool to hear her story. Thank you, Inspire Business Community, for partnering with us for this season of the Silo Podcast. Creatives, if you need a spot to work with other people, brainstorm, or have an office, Inspire's got you covered. We can't thank you enough for letting us host the podcast in your space. So beautiful, and it made for a perfect backdrop. Let's get into it. Yo, welcome to the Silo Podcast. I'm here with Helen.
Hello.
And we're gonna talk all things creativity and also a little bit about what she's going through right now. So Helen, what are you going through? We've talked, I think, 3 years ago when we did like our Instagram live interviews. There's a lot that's happened since 3 years ago when we've chatted. I mean, walk us through like, what have you been up to?
Well, I guess 3 years ago would have been during pandemic vibes. So at that time, which we discussed during our previous filming, I was doing more business type things. I was trying to pay for college. And then as I kept progressing forward, I did more and more shoots. And then we kind of got into this sphere of education and programs for people because I had all these resources that I didn't know. I mean, I could have just kept using them for myself, but that felt weird because more of our connections became friendships, and then other people had needs or wanted to be inspired as artists. And so I just kind of wanted to offer whatever I could. And that turned into a lot of classes and collaborations. The biggest one being the ship, which was an apprenticeship last year. We had like 25, 30 participants and then mentors in addition to that. And that was just a really cool experience for people to try their hand at production at a larger scale. And then, this year I like came out of the gate thinking we're going to do so many things. It's going to be crazy. We're going to have events and parties. I feel like Older and Wiser knows how to throw a party, but
Facts.
We had like a ton of parties and events and panel discussions and different things like that.
Equinox.
But then as this year kept going, I just realized that I was ready to kind of transition into something less intense. So it's like a really short synopsis.
Yeah, I mean, I remember last year when you like were dipping into education. Like that was such a cool shift from like where you were of like shoots are my center. I want clients as well. Yeah. Hey, but now I'm bringing in this new aspect from the experience I've had. Yeah. Like, was that the reason why you switched or, pivoted, if you will, in the 2020 term pivot?
Right. Yeah, it went from super singular to just, we use the word community so many times and it's going to get annoying, but that's basically what it went from, was just singular to more community facing. And I think that came from a natural desire that was there from the beginning. To everything that I did with Older and Wiser was because I wanted to create and I didn't really know how to do that. And so I just decided to try, and anything that I had as an idea, I just did. So if that was like publish a magazine, host an event, find some way to teach classes, open a studio, have art shows, like anything that came to mind, I was just like, let's do it. And the pattern that I noticed recently was that I'm really bad at doing things more than once. That was kind of what helped me realize I was ready to transition out of it, was because I did so many things, and it kind of got to the point where I was like, there isn't really anything else that I would love to try for the first time. And the thought of doing something for a second time was just kind of like, I can't. Like, I now know how much work it takes to do that thing, and I don't want to do it again. But like the first time you just jump in, you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. This is so exciting. This is thrilling. This is so much more work than I thought it was going to be. But the high is going to be the payoff. And the high is always the payoff. But then once you have the knowledge of how much work it takes to do it again, it's like, nah, I don't have it in me.
Yeah, sure, you can be like automate some things or be more efficient with others, but there's still
Right.
like it may take even longer because you want to add something new or correct a mistake from the first time.
Yeah. And I think I also was wrestling. I mean, anytime that Older and Wiser was like bursting at the seams with ideas is actually some of the hardest times in my life because I was definitely using work as a coping mechanism. So if Older and Wiser was thriving, I was not, because I was just like, I'll just put all of my effort into this and this will make me feel better. But I think I also was wrestling a lot with what it means to be an artist, what it means to be an entrepreneur, what it means to be a creative director, because throughout that whole journey, I really struggled to identify myself. And I would listen to what other people were saying and would kind of try on that title, see if I liked it, try on a different title. And the two that stuck the most were creative director and artist, because those are technically what I am doing. For a while, entrepreneur was also one of them, because of the client work and all of that. But I realized that I didn't want to work for myself because it is much harder than you think. And I think every artist has to go on that journey and figure out if it's for them or not, because you can hear all the advice, but until you try it and feel it out for yourself, you're just not going to know.
And even doing events by yourself, it's like, yeah, I can be the one that is coming up with the idea and executing it like immediately. And there's freedom of just being able to just do what I want to.
Yeah.
But that also expends so much more energy than either having a team or working for someone else.
Yeah. And quite frankly, it's just not sustainable. So like, I think that's where the piece of entrepreneurship comes in, is to be an entrepreneur, you do have to be innovative and mindful of how to create systems that will sustain. Because if you are going to be the one leading the charge, you have to be able to not always be focusing on how everything is doing like all at once. You have to have the ideas and push forward, and that means you have to have good systems behind you. And I am capable of that in sprints, but I am not capable of it in long races.
But if we're talking about sprints,
and we're talking about sprints, baby.
Oh, yeah. There's so many times where I have like a creative sprint, and it happened this week where I was just like, I'm going to stay up until 2 a.m. I just need to get this stuff done. There's been 7 DMs waiting for me, like 18 texts. I'm not going to answer them all week. But when the sprint happens, that is when
I'm coming for you. I'm coming for you.
That is when you will get a thank you email from me that you've been waiting for months,
right?
Or haven't been waiting for at all. But I'm like, here's my gratefulness. Get it out of the way.
Yeah, I love you. Yeah. So I think it's really important to be mindful of that in the decisions that you're making, and it also is important as a creative to give yourself the space to have experience to then base your decisions off of. But at some point you do have to make decisions about like, can I do this? Can I not do this? Should I be doing this? Should I not be doing this? And then actually move forward instead of being wrapped up in the emotions of like, I don't know, I have all this dream, I have all these things I want to do. And then you never do anything. And then you end up, 10 years down the line being super tired and going out and like not making any money as an artist because, well, but at some point, well, we go. So,
yeah,
there's a way to do that without losing,
Mm-hmm. There's like, if you find a stride of like your bread and butter, so like maybe it's a podcast for Silo or something like that, where you can find, hey, that pays the bills, blah blah blah, but I need to be fulfilled creatively. I will do other things. It sounds like for you, it was a constant change, so you were never able to find your bread and butter potentially, other than events, which you've been killing it at, and anyone will say that. But like, that was your bread and butter, but it's time to find something that maybe fulfills you as a person rather than fulfilling the community and then having the community fulfill you during that time.
Yeah, and I think also too, like, doing all of those things at the time I was doing them, they did feel like bread and butter for that season, you know? And like when I was doing client work and I was getting paid for it, it was really cool. Like that was an extra source of income. But yeah, I think just being aware of, for instance, like you do a lot of videography and photography, and you've put a lot of systems in place that make it sustainable and manageable. You know, that requires a different part of your brain than just the creativity. So that's why I know there are people out there who are way better at this than me, who are like, I don't want to give up this thing that I love so much, so I'm going to figure it out. And it just so happened that because I created the portfolio that I did with Older and Wiser, I was able to get a job for a nonprofit that I really, really love. And I don't have to create sustainability for my work. I can actually just do it because I love it. And to me, yeah. And so to me, that's the path that I've chosen, is to not monetize as much the things that I'm doing, but that's not for everybody. And that's totally okay.
Yeah. So where does that leave you now that you feel comfortable in the day job that you have? Like, I know we've talked in private, but like, what does Older Advisor look like now that you're approaching your 4th year?
Yeah. Well, this year is still like so many things left to do with summer programming. But I think after that, Older and Wiser will still take on clients and do photo shoots and branding if people want that. But it's okay to be selective about who those clients are and not just do it because it's a job and you have to make money. So I'll still do clients and I'll still do collaborations with people because that is like my life source, you know, and especially looking back on the last few years and how those collaborators have turned to genuine friends, that's just way too special to not keep doing it, you know? So I think I'm going to do that. And then, Older and Wiser always feels weird because it's not, I said this in a little speech this week, of Older and Wiser is not a business or an organization or a nonprofit. It is a human thing. And it exists in me. It exists in the people who also are a part of that community. It's kind of an extension of myself. So as I continue to learn and grow as a creative director, I think Older and Wiser will go with that wherever it may be. And I don't really know where that is right now.
Yeah. Do you consider that a personal brand, you would say, or is it still like like one layer maybe removed from Helen?
I think I like to keep it one layer removed so that, you know, when you make things and you're really, really proud of them and you feel like they were really deep and moving, there is a little bit of you that's afraid that it won't be accepted or understood or whatever. And so I think Older and Wiser is kind of like a stage that I can put my work onto. And when you're walking onto that stage, you still feel the jitters, but like what happens on the stage stays on the stage, you know? And then when you step back, you still have your own real person. You know?
It gives you like that, you can step off the stage rather than, you know, always being on the stage as a personal brand. That's something that I think most people would strive for, of being able to be like, I can rest. And I think that's the season maybe you're stepping into as well, of like not sprinting, if we're bringing back some older terms, to do some of that work that you've been up to.
Yeah. Nice pause.
I mean, so during your event that you just had, walk us through kind of what Pomp and Circumstance was, and like what your heart was behind it, and what that says about where you're headed.
Well, it was, so to be completely honest, I actually didn't want to do anything this summer at all. I knew I was supposed to do some kind of summer programming because the ship was so impactful and like,
yeah, you
meaningful.
hyped the ship up, and
I
you're
know.
like, it's coming back.
It's coming back, baby. And then I was like, so, yeah, I felt a lot of pressure. And then I had somebody that was kind of like, I'm just going to shout her out. It was Tiffany Chavez, and she is a amazing makeup artist. and she's worked on a lot of shoots with me. And I was talking to her about how I just was feeling so anxious and overwhelmed. Like, I do not want to do this. Like, at the time when I said I wanted to do it, I did. I had every intention of doing it. And now I just feel so depleted. Like, I will still do it because I said I would, but I don't want to do it. And she just kind of reminded me that the reason that people came is because you were excited about it, and the energy you put into the work you create is a magnet to the things that we, give to people. And so if you're not into it, then the people won't come. So you're going to put in all that effort, and then no one's going to show up because you didn't really show up for it. So then I was actually going to not do anything. And then we were like basically promised funding for it. And we were promised funding for it, and then the funding didn't come through. But at that point I had already decided, like, okay, cool, we have funding, I'll do it this way, we'll like set it up, whatever. And then that didn't come through. And so then I was like, shoot, I'm screwed again. But now I had enough of a glimmer to get me into the creative hype that I feel like I can do it. Like, I had transitioned into the mindset of like, just make it through. And then once I got into that, it was like, yeah, actually, I'm excited about this. So I knew I should still honor the fact that I could tell I was done. And when I was thinking creatively what that looked like, I didn't feel like I was done. Like, this is dead was very, but I felt like when you graduate and you're moving on to the next phase of life, you really treasure and admire and just have a special place for everything that happened in the last 4 years of your life.
Yeah. You got to honor that.
Yeah. And you celebrate that. And then you move into the next thing, not knowing what it is, hoping that it's something worthwhile. And some of the people that you just graduated with are probably going to be there with you in that season, So that's where the idea for Pomp and Circumstance, which, in case anybody doesn't know, that is the title of the graduation song.
Yeah, good clarification.
Yeah, it is like that. That's Pomp and Circumstance. So Pomp and Circumstance, and then Thesis is basically a smaller version of the ship. And it's kind of the play on the idea of a final project. And then Commencement is the final art show. So Commencement is usually like the start of something new, but it's also, we think of it in commencement speech terms. So that's where the graduation theme came from.
Which is perfect. The best 3 titles for events ever.
I literally said to someone, I was like, I think I could start a cult just because of the way that I can come up with these names for things and just like get the buy-in.
Perfect and like
get
poignant to everything. Yeah.
Yeah. So
let's actually rewind real quick. Can you explain to me why you're maybe moving out of this? Did we touch on this earlier? Like, what did you burn out? Did you realize that the job was something you wanted to focus more on?
I tried a lot of things and I didn't. It's not that I like got tired of trying new things, but when I look back on how much I did, it makes sense that I would be tired because a lot of the time I was doing that while I was still in school before I dropped out. And every project was just followed by the next thing. Like every month, there was never a month where I wasn't doing something. So,
I mean, back then it was college, job, and Older and Wiser.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And now it's job, Older and Wiser, which you picked up even more hours at your normal job.
Yeah.
And probably picked up more hours at Older and Wiser.
Yeah. And also, it's expensive to do most of the things that I have ideas for because I want them to be cool, like for myself, not even for anybody else. So like, I want this to be this, I want this to, whatever. And so they often are expensive. And I don't know if people think that I make a lot of money off Older and Wiser. I make $0 off of Older and Wiser now that I don't have clients. So it's really expensive. And it was also just a practicality choice of when I started, I was 20 years old and I lived in my mom's house. And now I'm 25 and I live on my own, and I am going through transitional seasons that people go through when they're 25. You get bills, you get things, and it's just not, it's not practical to keep the expenses of older and wiser projects, the amount of time and energy it takes to create those things, while I also have a job that's very similar in circles. And then, yeah, I was just like, I feel like I did enough for right now.
It's very similar to our situation, where it's like, if you get to a point where you're not making money, it's either betray the trust of your audience and like just start charging what it's actually worth, which they probably don't even know how much it's in the end worth. And you're just like, hey, $75, you got it? You don't? Okay, you're not coming. Which sucks, because we both built audiences that like just appreciate us, you know? It's not something you want to do where you're just like, and now I want to make money off of you.
Yeah. And I think that was a big part of it too, was I wasn't willing to register Older and Wiser as a business. Partially also the admin side is enough for me to be like, yeah, I'm not into it. And the more people you involve, the more like what you're saying about people not knowing how much it's worth. Part of that is just because of the amount of hours. If you factor in like a very low hourly rate, your event already is going to be like $100 per person, just because of the amount of time, you know? But yeah, I honestly just lost my train of thought when we were talking about that. Practicality.
What would you say, if we're going to dive into it, what is like an hourly rate you would say your like work is actually worth?
What it's actually worth?
I'm just going to like, yeah, we can cut this out, but I'm genuinely curious. And if we want to get deep.
It depends on the project.
Sure.
So like if I was doing client work, my hourly rate for clients should be at least $50 an hour. And part of that is maybe because I also don't have any other staff, so I am doing everything. But that is technically for client work, how much it should be. Do clients have a comprehension always of how many hours goes in the project? No.
That's creative work in general. Yeah. It's just like, oh yeah.
I don't even know. Sometimes I break it down and I'm like, oh my God, I'm losing so much money.
I mean, you can't just make that on Canva real quick and give it to me next week?
Yeah. So there's that. For events and projects, I honestly couldn't really tell you, because I don't really know what people in that field make or what they charge. But based on how much time I have available, it would be pretty close to the same rate for like
right
a project.
And it's different if you're passionate. Like you might come at a loss for something that really matters to you, as either you're building or you're just invested in it as a whole.
I mean, pricing yourself is always going to be difficult, because it depends on, first of all, how honest you are with yourself. And then if you even know how much your life costs, you know, like, do you have insurance? Do you have rent? Do you have groceries? Do you have Spotify, Netflix?
Cost of doing business is a real thing. And that's what I see all of like, when someone is just starting in photography, I'm in like these photography like Facebook groups and stuff. It's like, what should I be charging for this family event? And everyone's just like, what is your COBD? Cost of DB, cost of doing business. And they're like, oh, I have no idea. And they're like, start there.
Yeah.
And you want to take this full time.
Yeah. And everything that I said was just like their cost of living, not even like, because yeah, for Older and Wiser, I think usually it's about like $100 a month, $125 a month. And that's just to keep my website, my storage, and like my communication open.
Right.
And I'm not even doing business. I'm just paying that out of pocket to like essentially keep a brand. I am terrible at like preparing speeches. I will almost always write them the day before. I did the graduation speech at the school that I went to for a short time, and the day before, I just can't. I need the pressure to create.
Hey, that's fine.
But yeah, I rewrote it a couple times because I just wasn't sure what I should talk about. I didn't know if I should explain to people what was happening, or I didn't know who would be there. So, because Pomp and Circumstance was just this celebration of all the Older and Wiser we've done. There's like this video that showed some project that we did, and there was a little bit of this juxtaposition with a shoot that came from a really difficult time for me that showed the struggle as an artist. And it was right after seeing all this big hype, and, you know, it's just to help people kind of process big things don't just happen because you're like, oh, I should do something big. Like, meaningful things happen because you're processing something and you want something to happen, you know, whatever. So yeah, then the speech was right after that. And so I was thinking in my mind, should I explain to people obviously what happened, or should I just talk about where we're going? And that morning, I rewrote the speech. And I was also really anxious because I never spoke about my faith publicly.
That was a cool aspect.
Yeah, I usually keep it neutral because I think I really love that art makes way for people of different beliefs and circles to come together in unity. And we've had like a variety of different type of controversial things. And I was just like, it's not controversial, like in the way that we're talking about it. We're just representing multiple perspectives, because I think that's like the whole point of art is we're all trying to understand who we are and what this human experience is. So we need to be open to observing and creating art that is from a different perspective than just one, you know. But I felt just so compelled. I was in like this little quiet booth with their work, and I was literally crying in the quiet booth as I was writing this. And I just felt like that resonance, you know, that like full body yes of it's okay for you to do this. Because I didn't want to put myself before, I don't know. I didn't want to like put myself before the bigger picture when I was creating things. And I wanted people to be able to write their own story in. And I think this night kind of felt like I'm telling you my story, what my story has been this whole time underneath everything that we've done together. And it's not wrong that my story is different than yours. So I'm going to share it, and I'm going to trust you that that's okay, because I made room for you to share your story, you know? So, and it was such a blip, like to some people it probably meant nothing.
Yeah.
But to me, I was like, so scary.
That was the best, like that was one of the best parts. And I feel like it's like one of those like half alive quotes where it was like, you know, you were made to create because of bringing dust to form something.
Yeah.
And then it was because of, I think you said like, because of our creator, something similar to that.
Yeah. Yeah. I just wanted to point out that everything that I create, or the reason that I value creativity, is because I do think that human beings are created, and that you have the fingerprints of that in yourself as well. Like, that is why people are compelled to create, is because you are creative. You can obviously disagree with that, create for your own reasons, and that's fine. But like I said, you only got one life. That's how I'm gonna live mine. So that's kind of a snippet of that speech. And the rest of it was supposed to be a thank you to people for giving me the space to really just process my life. That's what I was doing. And the quote that was at the end, I think is my quote, but I didn't quote myself because I can't remember if I heard it somewhere else. But I do always say that art is the overflow of self-exploration. And I think that, when we're creating, the most potent creativity is when you are trying to understand yourself, trying to understand why you're here, where you're going, what is the point of it. And it's in that tension, which tied into what our TED Talk later is about. But it's that tension and that friction that creates good art. And in our lemon heavy content world, we create because we're supposed to, or there's a deadline, or there's a certain number you're supposed to meet. And that is why so much of what we're creating these days is meaningless, because there is no reason that you really made it. You know?
Yeah, it's all filler, or it's deadlines, like you said. Yeah, I think what comes from the heart is that overflow through the experience that you had. It all makes sense. And like, that was a really impactful moment of the whole pomp and circumstance of just like hearing your story, sewing in the actual parts of who you are, and then ending on like, how did you end it?
Well, great question.
It was something along the lines of like, I'm so glad I invited you to exist And now I
Oh.
take you on a journey to exist myself.
Yes, that's what it was. I was thanking people for creating space, blah, 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 all of them you said. And then I said, yeah, something along that line of like, thank you for making space for me to be here while I learned how to be, or something like that. You know?
That was like a perfect ending to.
I was nervous, honestly. I was just like, hopefully we can hold on. But yeah.
And I think moving then into what Tom said of all the reasons why we create, and he dove so deep into everything, and I'm so glad that you had him just like take it, and it was the most perfect way to like move forward.
So many of us wanted to hear from Tom for like approximately 2 years, so he kind of owed it to us to show up. He was so excited. He showed up the day before, actually, and I was like, Tom, I know you're really thrilled to be here. The event is tomorrow, so he came the next day. But yeah, his TED Talk was on, what was the phrase? It was like hurt so bad or something. Hurt so good.
Why does creativity hurt so good?
Yeah, and just kind of showing how, I mean, he's somebody who designs and coordinates teams that design Harry Potter sets that travel internationally around the world. And I thought it was so interesting that his day-to-day experience could be placed over your day-to-day experience, and it would probably be pretty much the same or very similar. And I thought that was actually one of the most inspirational things to me about it. Even though he said profound things, that was the most inspirational piece to me, was here's somebody that I respect and aspire to be like, and their day basically looks the same as mine. So it's just kind of encouragement to keep trying, keep pushing, and also just be aware that what you do, like, it might not be what you expect. Like, the job he's doing right now is not the same job he's doing a year ago, but his days still look the same.
Right. And the messiness of life is still there no matter what caliber job or position or, you know, whatever you're taking on. Like, the messiness of life. And the coolest part was when he went through his entire day and like made a mosaic of his thing. He's like, and that's art.
And that's
and I just made something right in front of you guys.
Right. Yeah. That was cool. Yeah.
And I think, one of the things that hit me hardest was him explaining, I think it was point 2 of like, it hurts so good to be an artist, and the struggles that you face and the experience that you face is honestly your style, or like how your art is yourself. Because if you take you out of the question, it is nothing.
Yeah. I think that's too why when I stepped into the education realm, felt no stress about being like, I mean, we live in this age where you have to pay $200 for someone to fairly tell you what their method is, and then you have to buy the next class and the next class. I'm like, I'll tell you what I do because you're not me, so we can't do the same thing. There's no fear of you taking over my role. You're going to do your own thing.
There's like a structure to it, but without that human plug, it doesn't mean anything. You need to be yourself in your art.
Yeah, which is so interesting too. And like the AI development that we're now in, it's like, I think we'll see that more and more, is we've been adapting to be more for the digital realm. We've been adapting, I think, by losing our humanness and producing and creating like just meaningless content for what the algorithm says, whatever. And now the AI is here and fully public to just take over a million jobs that we normally would do. I think people will have to lean so much harder into the human element again. And I'm actually really excited to see what that looks like.
I agree. I think it's something like, I would say what the overall best practices are the most watered down because they're for sure to work. And so as we are growing, or as we are perfecting our own craft towards the algorithm, we are watering down while still marketing our stuff up.
Yeah, honestly, yeah, that was it. That was it right there.
That was sick.
Yeah. So if anything, that I think reiterates for me why Older and Wiser, I'm just trying to like pull it in and refine it a little bit more, because I was enjoying that spread out aspect and just like stretching my wings and everything. But I think it also did become clear to me that if you don't start narrowing in what your skills are and actually being really good at those skills, because I'm really good at just taking it,
I think all of
as
us
is
do, yeah.
everyone. But I think I would just like that reassurance of, I know what I'm doing. I know what I bring to the table. And I just want to do that instead of doing a million things.
I think too many people like project, and it's either dishonesty or less information, but they project as if they know what they're doing and like are the perfect videographer, the perfect creative director. And after you like pick at their brain for a little bit, you're like, you're just as messy as I am, or, you know, you have the same marital problems that I do, blah, blah, blah. You know, you're dealing with trauma that I have dealt with, and that brings you closer to them. But also they are like not hiding that, but it brings them down to a human level that you think that they weren't at the start. Yeah. And too many people do that.
We don't get to live long enough to protect ourselves. So just assume
everything you do is growth. Like,
yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't know too. I might just I'm not going to disqualify and tell you that.
Amen.
Really,
Don't disqualify yourself. You're here for it.
I really love to zone in on the philosophical aspect of being an artist, probably because before I had the skills of being an artist, I still had the heart of it. And when I look back at myself, I can see that it was always there. And that really helped with not discrediting, you know, who you really are. But I love to really zone in on that. And I've been told that I'm too abstract in my speaking, which I understand. Sometimes I am. I get
that's the draw, though. I know you keep saying like, I'm getting a little too heady up here. It's no, that's the cool part, because I'm not that person. I'm that person that like speaks in like layman's terms about stuff. So for you to bring up the more abstract, the more, you know, you're a writer too. So like, you know, this is in your vocabulary. So keep going.
Well, and I think it's also people are artists for different reasons. Like some people love the technical side of it, and that's fine too. But I think that's what often makes me love and hate art, is that it is so difficult to give yourself fully to it and not lose yourself, as another thing Tom talked about putting yourself into your work and not losing yourself because you gave too much. But I think that's, if you can find like that balance for yourself of why are you doing this? What do you believe about humanity? What do you believe your work is actually doing or the impact it's making? Then that is what will keep you going no matter how many transitions you go through, because it's that grit that you need to keep you grounded in a sense. Like I will always keep creating because I will always have questions, and I will always think, the curse of a writer, that I understand the oppression of humanity like more than the average person. And writers are the worst. And I will always feel the need to express that, or the responsibility to point it out, and to also point out the beauty that is found in that darkness. That's another like artist pillar that I have, is make room for darkness so that light can have an entrance. And so yeah, it's just really important for you as an artist to know.
The entire crew over here, I heard it. I'm like, I had to get it on screen too.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's one of my artist pillars. And I think that would be like the biggest piece of advice I could give to somebody who's trying to figure out how to maneuver through transitions, is what are the pillars holding up your creativity, your mind palace, whatever you want to call it. I've already said to mine, art is the overflow of self-exploration. I always need to explore. I always need to be seeking answers about myself and my world. And at the end of the day, light and darkness are just as important as myself.
What would you say to someone that hasn't found those pillars yet, or found that foundation yet? How does someone explore that?
I think that the way I did it was looking back on a body of work. So I do think sometimes you just create, and that's partially what was probably driving my creativity, was I'm just trying to figure out why I'm doing this and who I am. So I just made as much stuff as I could. And you can see if you look at the span of older and wiser stuff, it changed over time. And then now it's pretty consistent. It's much darker. I started working with less and less photographers, and I work with probably the same 3 most of the time. And the themes changed. The narrative became more intentional, and just like the style overall became more solidified. So then I could look at that and I could see patterns of, well, this is clearly what I'm drawn to, and I can't not make this if I'm just creating with no agenda. And then when you try and interpret that of like, okay, I'm really drawn to darkness, but I'm not inherently trying to make things evil or dark or scary. So why am I creating so much darkness? My narrative always seemed to end in hope, which is another artist pillar, always end in hope for me. And when I thought through that more, like, instead of just this is literally what I'm doing, when I thought more metaphorically, why am I doing this? It made sense because I grew up in an environment that felt very inescapably dark. And when I finally was able to leave that, I always told myself, like, I'm never going back. I will never let that happen to me. I will never be in this traumatic, like, situation again. And then I realized that life is actually just real hard, and you don't always have control over those things. And the thing you do have control over is your response and the way that you carry those things. And that's why it's in my work is I will always end in hope, because that's the only way you survive. And I will accept darkness, because with darkness comes light. And I will create, because I will always be.
Explain to me what the art of finishing well means to you, because that's something that you brought up in Pomp and Circumstance. So, like, what does it mean for you to be finishing well? And I think Tom also mentioned that he's seen that in you.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting when Tom brought that up, because I was like weeping while Tom was saying, first of all, very nice things about me, but also was saying, like, was affirming. You recognize that it's time to finish something, maybe not the whole thing, but to finish something and to finish it well. And I think I subconsciously was creating this experience to help myself reach that point. I don't think that when I was making all the Pomp and Circumstance stuff happen, that I was like, all right, we're going to finish so strong. I was just like, whatever, we just have to make it through. This is what we're doing. We'll figure it out as we go. And I'm very comfortable staying open to that communication. I do think there's a conversation you have with yourself while you're creating, if you're willing to listen. And it just led to that point where Tom was like, he just said straight up, Helen knows how to finish something well. And I was like, okay, I don't know if I believe that.
But I think there was a collective, like, head nod, like, yep, she's doing it.
Right. And I was like, I started crying because it really clicked for me of like, you are finishing something, whether you were fully ready to accept that or not. Now you are. And so I think sometimes finishing well is just like everything we've been talking about, acknowledging the shifting. And you can view it as a transition. You don't have to view it as like what I'm doing. But if in that transition you can sense that there is an ending to something, it's not even that you have to make this abrupt, like, all right, it's happening. It can be more of this open dialogue of, I'm finishing. What does that really mean? How do I honor that? Do I see this clearly, or is it still muddy? Maybe I should redirect, whatever. But yeah, I think, again, I'm always going to make it way to like up here. To me, finishing well means accepting that something is over and you have to make way for whatever's new. And you don't have to have the answers about what that is before you start properly dailying something.
Right. You don't have to have the future answer, the security of the future before letting go of something that you've had.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it, is like for me, everything starts with the mindset. And if you reverse it and you just try and do like action, 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 and then try and catch up, like, I mean, that works, I guess. But for me, I always need like these big swells of like, I think something's happening. We're going to be okay. Okay. I'm definitely like a self-soother. I'm always like, you're okay. You're okay. Everything's fine. We're going to make it. And then in that process, just being open to yourself changing and your ideas changing. And that was the biggest thing I feel like that I tried to emphasize in the speech as well. It's like change will always be here.
I think a lot of times too, I think what I see when I see you make these transitions or have a big decision to make is that you're always asking others too. Like Tiffany was the one that helped figure out what is going to happen this summer. Did you explain this to anyone and have their input either help soothe you or confirm what you were thinking?
Yeah, I did actually. I am way too much of a verbal processor, if you can tell. And so I do that with even when I'm starting something too. I will just like talk about it a lot. You know, there's different views on that, but I will just talk about things a lot so that I can hear how I'm involuntarily talking about it. I'll just start like saying whatever comes to mind, and then I'll listen to what I'm saying. And oftentimes that reveals to me how I really feel about something. But yeah, conversations with people who have no idea. I do love to hear a variety of perspectives. Something that someone told me though, that's really stuck with me is you can ask as many people as you want, but at the end of the day, you're going to make the decision you think you should make. I am actually really excited for where Old and Wiser is going because it's going to, I think I'm just excited by the newness, which makes sense because anytime I did something before, it was new. It's the first time. So I can feel that same excitement. I'm really excited to also learn and have time to learn because I'm not outputting. I've been saying probably for a year that I was in outputting on fumes. I'm not gonna lie, I think that's pretty dang impressive to be like putting out the level of things we were making on literally zero energy. So I'm just gonna go ahead and take that one.
If that was like during the ship era of Helen, like that's a big deal.
I would say like right after. Yeah.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So yeah, not like during that, but yeah, pretty much like the equinox, all of that stuff was like, we're really trying, you know? So I think I'm really excited to just have more time to learn. I'm also a different person than I was when I first started this. And so everything I was inputting before I was 20 is kind of what I've been riding on since then. And so I'm really excited to input again at 25 and see where that leads to the next thing. And I kind of like that I don't know what that is. I love that I am surrounded by so many people, like so many people. I'm not on fire right now. I just want you to know it was about to come. I was like, oh my God, it's coming. I am just like surrounded by so many people, and I could have never imagined that happening. Like the amount of people that are genuine and creative, and they're my friends, and we get to do cool stuff together, and we understand each other and we speak the same language. Like that's the biggest deal to me, honestly, out of everything. And just doing more things with them.
And you met them along the way, some of them along the way too.
Most of them. Yeah, because when I moved back here and when I started Older Wiser, I just moved back to the state. So all of my old friends I actually didn't really have connections with anyone. So most of my friendships actually have just come from this, but just both. I know.
I can say the same thing. Like
yeah.
Like a good more than half of my friends are from just investing in community.
Yeah.
And you get out 10 times what you put in with that stuff.
Yeah. So I don't really know what's coming, but I'm just excited to see whatever it might be. And I think I'm just like very at peace and like very comfortable with the life that I've unintentionally built with my friends and having to just live that life now.
Helen, thanks for being here.
Should we count up overtime?
Boom, that's the episode. Let's go.
Yes.